to welcome everyone. Are you ready? I'd like to welcome everyone to our CRA meeting this April the 1st, 2021. With that, I'll call this meeting to order. Could we please stand together for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Jesse, how about calling the roll, please?
Member Dwight Loading. Here. Vice Chair Joel Davis.
Here.
Member Keith Trace.
Here.
Member Chuck Cooper. Absent. Member Dave Askew.
Here.
Member Lynette Matheny. And we did hear from her this evening. She has an excused absence for this evening's meeting. Chair Nathan Blackwell.
Here. Brings us to the first item on our agenda, the approval of our minutes from February the 4th, 2021. Are there any corrections or additions anyone has? If not, could I have a motion that we approve the minutes?
I do have one question on it.
Yes, sir.
Was that the meeting where somebody inquired whether this amendment that we're getting ready to approve had been previously approved and we were told that it was? Because that's not in those minutes.
I'm not sure. I can go back and rewatch that. I might have missed that in error in my notes.
It might have been the meeting before, but I think it was last meeting.
Well, I can't answer that question. Do you have any corrections to the minutes other than your inquiry?
That's it.
Is that an issue, you think?
Well, it depends. If you feel like it needs to be included in the minutes, you may want to just allow Jesse to look at it and then put it on the next agenda for approval, if you think.
I'll do that.
Okay.
I'll rewatch the video and amend those minutes if it's there.
And then you can just hold off on this until the next meeting.
Okay. Can we go ahead and approve these?
Well, I was going to
Before,
suggest...
so do we just bring them back to the next
bring them
meeting?
bring them back at the next meeting after
All
Jesse.
right, that sounds good then. Brings us to our first item of new business. And
Good evening, CRA Chairman Blackwell and board members. Jeff Cooper, I'm the Deputy Finance Director, here to present CRA Budget Amendment Number 1. The CRA is requesting approval and amendment of the FY 2021 CRA budget to fund a portion of Phase 2 of the Downtown Revitalization Project.
Mr. Mayor, I'm
Yes.
sorry to... Can we hold off on the meeting for a second? Apparently the front door was locked and we may have members of the public that are trying to get in, so...
we will definitely wait. So does one of us need to go down and...
I think Ms. Forbes is on her way.
Okay.
Was it the door or the elevator?
I don't know. She didn't answer. I said, is the door locked? And I didn't get a response.
Okay. I was under the impression it was the elevator, but something, one or the other.
Yeah, that would be rather difficult to...
It may be the
At the
elevator.
meeting.
Yes, she said it's the elevator that won't go up.
Yeah, I told her just to run up the steps.
Yeah, you can't get in that door.
You can't get in the door.
That's gonna be an issue for anybody.
Yeah.
The elevator's locked.
Yeah, that's what was stopping her.
Yeah, I'll see if they have an extra.
You just get extra exercise in that one.
Yeah,
Because you're going back down.
That was it. It's the door was locked. That's why she didn't come.
That's
I don't think the elevator's moving either.
Do you have anyone
No, it's not.
Do you have anyone left in your department?
Suzette's still over there.
Could she watch the door
she
and badge people up the elevator?
If she's still there.
Oh, well, it's trouble that came. It's trouble that came too.
That's, yeah, apparently. Had I have only known.
Anybody left in the building?
She's probably come for a check on Joel.
You need someone to
least for the next 15 or 20 minutes.
Thank you.
Is that because of the time and next?
So the door's locked and the elevator's locked?
So City Hall is open, but the elevator is locked because due to COVID, we have restricted access through the building. So we failed to let our IT department know to unlock the elevator. I apologize for that.
Okay.
We're just back in City Hall, so we have to get back in the
Get back in the
swing
rhythm.
of using these chambers and making, getting used to the accommodations that we made due to COVID.
I don't think there's anybody down there.
It's just the elevator's kept locked right now.
Probably just wait a few minutes and then we can probably reconvene.
Because internet went down,
Yeah.
so. Sorry, Jeff.
I'm just going to stay down for this 15 to 20 minutes.
Okay,
We're good.
then we will commence. Mr. Cooper, we'll recognize you again.
Once again, thank you, sir. For a member of the audience, I'm Jeff Cooper. I'm the Deputy Finance Director. So I'm here to present CR Budget Amendment Number 1. So this is to transfer the 2019-20 unencumbered funds from the CRA account in the amount of $2,589,460 to Project PW 2000, which is the Downtown Revitalization Phase 2. Estimated total project costs at this time is $5.2 million, with the CRA funding the $2,589,460 at this time, or 47% of the project. This request will be the first budget amendment to the 2021 CRA budget. This is not up there, but this is in accordance with Florida statutes 163.387 that has to do with redevelopment trust funds. We do have a separate audit for the CRA now. We just did receive our financial statements for last year. So as part of the audit, what they're going to check from this point forward is that any unencumbered funds at the end of the fiscal year, you either have to dedicate them to a CRA-approved project, such as PW 2000, or you could pay down debt if you have any, or you have to return it. So just so you know, moving forward, what we're going to be faced with. And that's, I think, it for that. Staff recommends approval of amendment number 1 of the 2021 CRA budget in the amount of $2,589,460 in support of Project PW 2000 Phase 2 of the Downtown Revitalization. Any questions?
Mr. Davis?
I have a couple. Where does that show up on here? Where is that coming out of? Which fund on this?
That was the next part of our meeting, but right now, sir, the money is sitting in fund balance. We did move it to restricted fund balance after we found out what the requirements were, so it's coming from fund balance. It's not anywhere, it wasn't budgeted for this year, so the fund balance of the 645 fund, the CRA fund, was $2,589,460. So we're dedicating that in its entirety, as required by Florida statute, to this project PW 2000.
But that was CRA money originally,
That is correct.
so it should be on this budget somewhere.
No, sir, because it was not budgeted. We
So
don't,
it just
we only
isn't-
budget for fund balance when we use it. Otherwise, you will not see that on the budget. It will be now because we're adding it to the budget, but since we weren't able or weren't in need of fund balance to balance our budget this year, that's why it's not reflected on there.
So where did it come out of to go into that fund balance?
Prior year's fund balance from the CRA fund.
So it should be in a carryover on this somewhere, right? A carry forward?
No, sir, not unless you use it to budget with. This report, it doesn't come out of finance, so I'm not totally familiar with it. I think the Community Development Department puts that together. I'm sure if you would like that added in the future, we could certainly do that, but as I said, from this point forward, we are required to budget for all funds that are left over from year to year. So if we have any funds remaining at the end of this year, we will have to budget it towards a CRA-approved project or return it.
So prior to this, in previous years, if the CRA had money, unbudgeted money, unencumbered money left over, it got pulled back into the city general fund?
No.
No, sir. That's where this 2.5 million is an accumulation of several years or more
Right.
of revenues over expenditures in this particular fund. So
Right.
it's just been building and building, and now we're at the point that we can't do that any longer.
But how does that not show up as a balance on this, in the CRA?
I would have to refer you to the people in community development. As I said, I don't do that report, but as a budget report, it's not going to be on a budget report because it's not part of your budget. Your budget is what you're using as revenues and what revenues you're using for expenditures. So we have enough revenues that we don't need to pull from prior year balance.
But this isn't just a P&L type of statement, this is also a balance sheet.
I do not believe that's what its intentions are, sir.
I
But
would
once
think
again,
Is-
Andre and
is looking at this.
the Community Development Department might be able to answer you better, but this is more of a budget statement than a balance sheet. I'm sure if you would like that moving forward, they could certainly put that on there for you.
Yeah. Mr. Davis, I think that we can, at the next meeting, show you the additional account line items that it would have been sitting in that is not included on this report.
Okay. I
And the
think
next meeting
we've got
it will
balance
be-
sheets from before, I'll pull one out.
It will be on there actually as of the next meeting because it'll show up as expenditures and intergovernmental transfers because this money will go into the Fund 300, which is our capital projects fund. So it will show up on this report the next time you meet, and the actual prior year fund balance at that point will be zero. So there won't be any need for a carryover balance because there will be none.
So it's gonna wipe out any excess or savings account this CRA would have had, for lack of better language.
From prior years, not from this year. Once we get to the statements, I mean, you'll see our budgeted revenue is $1.118 million, and our expenditure level thus far has only been about $300,000. So we're on track to generate additional excess, maybe $500,000 or more by my estimation, that at the end of this fiscal year, we'll have to determine what we're doing with that. Are we going to apply it to PW 2000, another CRA approved project, or are we going to return it to the taxpayers?
Okay, and my last question is.
Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt. If everyone could just speak into their mic so we get everything on record.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My last question is, have any of these monies been expended that we're just now transferring?
The $2.5
Yeah.
million? No, it can't be expended until we move it to an expenditure line, which that's what this budget amendment's doing. It just sits in fund balance. It sits in your savings account, fund balance, until you get an approved budget amendment then it moves to an expenditure
Yeah.
line, then you can expend it.
I understand the concept and how it's supposed to work. So you're telling me that none of that money has been spent so far?
Not of that 2,589,460.
So when it goes into this account, there won't be an entry somewhere reimbursing some other account for an expenditure that was previously made?
No, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Looney?
Wow. That is confusing. But I do have some questions. Because if we, we look at this funding and you're saying, this is kind of accumulated over the years, but now if we don't use it, we're going to lose it. But if it's accumulated over years, how did we not lose it before? And if we're going to lose it, are we not losing all of it, just maybe a portion of it? Is my question.
We have 3 years that we have to spend it in after receiving it. And I also want to point out, we received the CAFR for the CRA today, and we're going to be putting that on the next agenda. So I think some of your questions about the cash and the assets are going to be, you'll be able to see that when you receive that report.
Okay. So some of that there, it's not at the point where we're going to lose it.
I would agree with you, but I'm not the deputy finance director.
I want to just put it out there.
I believe the way the Florida statute is worded, you do not get there's no time frame. Honestly, we were outside of compliance with that Florida statute prior to right now. So we should have either in prior years applied it to a CRA-approved project or paid down CRA debt or refunded it to the taxpayers. So this is bringing ourselves into compliance. And you won't ever lose any money unless you don't have a CRA-approved project to apply the fund balance at the end of the year to.
The way I remember, and I can be wrong on this, is as long as it was earmarked for something,
Yes.
a project.
That is correct.
Okay. As long as it was earmarked for a project, it could carry over, say the project was a year or two away or more.
That's
Yes.
correct.
That is
Okay.
correct. So, yeah, the downtown Phase 2 revitalization is not going to be, it doesn't have to be completed this year. You just have to dedicate the funds to a CRA-approved project, whether it be this year, next year, 2 years down the road. But eventually it needs to be spent for that purpose.
Okay.
And
So I realize this is this is Phase 2. This is Pennsylvania Avenue, correct?
Correct.
I'd love to see that done. When we did Phase 1, I know we put money towards that, and I can't remember the amount, but I'm looking at that saying, well, do we have to put that much towards that? Isn't there a funding for that road? If it's infrastructure, whatnot, and I understand the CRA, what we're here for in improving that road is going to help everything that we're sitting here and discussing tonight. But I also look at that is a little over a year ago, we were looking at a large project where there was large amounts of dollars to push that project forward. Now, if we put all our all our straws, that's not a good word, I guess, but, we put all our dollars over into this project where maybe some of that money could be coming from somewhere else, then we can't move forward on another project, anything from, acquiring other properties. And I'll tell you what, we need parking downtown, and there's so many projects we need to be looking at. I just can't believe a street project, there's not other funds somewhere else to take care of that. Why are we so involved, almost 50% with the CRA? That's how I look at it.
you do have, the CRA does have funding budgeted this year for buildings, if it's appropriate, $150,000. They also have funding budgeted for land, 50,000. And for like downtown signs of 50,000 as well. So right now, we have to dedicate it to a CRA-approved project. If there's another CRA-approved project that I'm not aware of, then you could certainly do what you're suggesting. But right now, in order to get ourselves into compliance, we have to dedicate it to the CRA-approved project that we have. And as I indicated, you're probably going to have $500,000 or more in excess funding from FY 2021 that you will be able to, if another project is identified, you will be able to dedicate that money to a separate project if that's what the board approves of.
Mr. Askew.
So I'll bring this up later, getting other projects or purchasing other things. Can you say $500,000 is going to be put in for purchasing future land or buildings? Is that considered a project?
I'm not a CRA expert,
Mr.
sir,
Mayor?
but I would say that's too vague.
Antoinette,
So, a couple of things. So, to
could
answer the
you,
question.
could you
Sorry.
state your name and address for the record?
Antoinette Forbes, Economic Development and Special Projects Manager.
Thank you.
So to answer board members Askew's question directly, if you want to specify a project, it needs to be a specific project, not necessarily just we'd like to, you know, do some landscaping, but it needs to be we're going to do specific landscaping at this particular area. Now, to answer the other question that came about as far as the use of appropriated funds, when we talk about a CRA, remember the CRA is really just a tool that you'll use for future activity that's happening. So while we may decide to use these funds for infrastructure and streetscape improvements, that doesn't mean that that's the only use for it. And so this is really just the starter project, which hopefully will bring on new development. A lot of times when you have older communities, they need to start basically refresh by doing some of these basic foundation projects in order that we can spark new development. When you have a new investor come in, they want to go vertical without having to do a lot of the foundation work, such as your upgrading your water and sewer and expanding roadways and such. And so we can offer that caveat to them in advance before they relocate. That is one of those non-financial incentives that we can offer, so that the money does not go directly into the developer's pocket. So that's really what the project is about. It's really about how do we offer an impact to investors and recruit new business into the area without having to offer direct financial incentives, if that sheds some light.
It does, but when we're talking about a blighted property or a property that's going up for sale, like the one on Minnesota and 10th Street for $99,000 in two properties, we can't move fast enough to purchase it. So if we end up using up this $2 million, I think Mr. Loning kind of hits it a little bit. There just seems to be, there's got to be a way under this new statute that we could put some money aside to say, hey, look, maybe Antoinette goes, hey, look, we have this property over here. The developer, maybe Save a Lot or something, came and said, hey, we want to sell it to you. We need $2 million. Oh, I'm sorry, we can't do that because we don't have anything in. So it just seems like there must be some way with this new statute that there's a way in there to say, look, we're not just saving that money. We're targeting this area in the entertainment district or the CRA that we want some of those properties, and we want to be able to help those people as well. But if we bring ourselves down to zero every single year, that doesn't seem to make sense. Something's wrong with that.
It forces you to go into debt on a project to then, now you can earmark it towards paying off the debt every year, right?
Yeah, I know Tallahassee's like honing down on the CRA, but there's got to be better wording in there or something.
And I think the intent of the statute is to identify future projects, not necessarily with such specificity that you're able to go out there and set up an agreement and have a project that's going to roll and it's going to be shovel-ready.
Right.
It's to identify projects. That's what CRAs were created about decades ago. That's why you have a CRA plan. The idea is to identify projects as you move forward. Mr. Loading mentioned parking. So we certainly could work on it if you want to do it, but if the CRA decided they wanted to do a parking project, we certainly could put into that project an allocation for property that would be potentially acquired as part of parking. So you wouldn't have to identify the specific property, you couldn't identify, you could just come in and say, you know, we think we're gonna need, 150 parking spaces. 150 parking spaces require an acre of property, whatever. You could identify that as part of your plan to do that as project-based, and it could get specific enough that you could allocate these dollars towards that project.
Okay. I mean, we're shedding some light on this.
So the Florida statute states, it does use the word specific, so it says appropriated to a specific redevelopment project pursuant to an improved community redevelopment plan. So if, as he mentioned, if you have a plan for a parking structure and you have established a project and you can budget for the land purchase as part of that, then that can meet this requirement. Like also, as I mentioned, we can move quickly, like if we were going to buy that property that you mentioned, we have $150,000 budgeted, so you didn't need a budget amendment or budget transfer or anything. You could have done it, with the proper approvals, of course. So you just budget, if you think you have land needs year to year, you just budget for it, and then you're ready to do it at a moment's notice. Now, that doesn't help you necessarily at the end of the year with the excess.
At a 7-day notice for public
Right.
meeting notice.
But at least you're budgeted for it, and you're like ready to go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions?
So if we approve this amount, and it seems to be very specific, and we can't channel any part of it anywhere else if something else comes up along the way.
Actually, the
Mr. Manzares?
statute actually does go on to say, the funds appropriated for such project may not be changed unless the project is amended, redesigned, or delayed, in which case the funds must be reappropriated pursuant to the next annual budget adopted by the Board of Commissioners of the Community Redevelopment Agency.
So essentially, what that means is what I was going to say. If the project stops, the project is modified, and the CRA's participation in the project is changed so that the CRA portion of it is now modified, then the dollars that are quote-unquote no longer needed could be reallocated to a different CRA project. Okay. The key umbrella is, as Jeff pointed out, is the plan, the overall improvement plan that has been adopted by the CRA with regard to the projects it wants to do. And as long as we remain consistent with that, and these projects either move forward and they're completed, or they're altered or amended, or frankly just stopped for whatever reasons, either delayed or for anything else, then you can reallocate the dollars, I believe. And one thing, Veronica mentioned the audit, and I just want to make sure it's clear, since we're talking about all these issues. I haven't seen the audit report, but I understand the audit report was, and council members know this phrase, was a fully clean audit. So
Yes, sir.
everything that has happened in the past with regard to the CRA now, and the auditors looked at it and said it's consistent with the statute and everything is clean. And you know the phrase, and the auditors use it all the time.
Yeah, but we've always been clean, haven't we?
Well, remember, this audit is a new requirement that
Right.
the statute has required. So you've never had a specific audit with regard to the CRA before.
That is correct.
Mayor?
And here's the audit if
Mr.
anyone would
Trace.
like to see it.
All right, just to kind of hop around on everyone's comments. Yep, Mr. Davis, the fund balance thing annoys the crap out of me on every single one of our funds, because you look at a budget and you're like, ooh, man, it's tight, but I'm looking at the CAFR, there's $2.6 million sitting in CRA, $17 million sitting in transportation, but you don't see that when you look at the budget. It's only the ins and the outs for that year. And if it balances, then you don't ever see the fund balance. So it's
That
just,
is correct.
whenever we talk about budgeting, I want to make sure that for every department, for city stuff, for CRA, we talk about fund balance as well whenever we talk about the budget. It's coming up in, August, September, October, when we go through all those meetings, because it has a big influence on decision-making for the budgeting process if you have a big piggy bank or a little piggy bank, or
Right.
big needs or little needs. So I just want to make sure we talk through that. Also, with Mr. Loading's comment, I think the CRA needs a strategy of projects, of needs, of funding things. I mean, the only thing that's really going on right now is we have $100,000 for the building facade grants and but this is a budget amendment. It wasn't even in the budget for this fiscal year. So the 7 of us need to put our heads together, and staff need to put our heads together of what projects do we want to do? What are the needs? How do we strategize? How do we prioritize and go with something?
Can I address that just
Yep.
quickly? So I've already asked Antoinette to come back to the CRA and have the CRA come up with a strategic plan. And then from that strategic plan, modify our CRA master plan, because it has not been modified since the CRA was created back in 2005.
Okay, and then we can get into the detail
Yes.
of what projects do we want to
Yes.
fund. I mean, we always talk about downtown, but the CRA,
Right.
stretches edge to edge almost of the city, and we, only talk about downtown. So,
Yes.
I think that Ms. Matheny brought that up a couple of meetings ago of, hey, do we ever talk about the east side, the west side? Also, with this in particular, because we have this 3-year thing now, whenever we have our budget, and I think this year we'll have some carryover money, but then we also have $283,000 of contingency. At the end of the year, can that go into a specific line, and we have 3 lines of last year's extra, 2 years ago's extra, 3 years ago's extra, to where we know how much has to be burned off? Does that make sense? Of like, to where it's not we just wait 3 years and then just blow it all, spend all the money.
Well,
We know
as-
year by year.
As it stands now, sir, we would have, from this point forward, you have to dedicate it all at the end of the year. So
Oh, I
we
thought it was
won't,
I
we
thought it was
won't have a
3 years.
2 years or 3 years back, because that will not exist any longer.
Oh, so they changed it again, because I thought it was a 3-year burn.
And it has been, and we need to take another
Yeah.
look at that and check on that.
That, I don't see that in the statute, but I
Is it
will
3 or
defer
is
to the
it
attorney
1?
on that.
Frankly, I thought it was 3, but I
Okay.
apologize.
Yeah, I thought it was a 3-year burn. So if it is, can we organize it that way?
Yeah, I honestly would like to request that staff have the opportunity. This is the first time I'm hearing some of the things that Mr. Cooper is saying. And I find I'm pretty familiar with the state statutes. So I'd like for staff to be able to go back and discuss this before we keep going down this rabbit hole about the 3 years and allocating everything.
Okay. And then I do feel this is a valuable project. I don't know if it's a council thing or if it's a CRA thing. Can we put the project kind of up on the screen with the full $5 million? How are we funding it? I know there's some stormwater that'll go into that. There's some water sewer funds that'll go into that, general fund, CRA fund, just where we see the whole breakdown. And I think the state had $300,000 that they threw into it as well. And
So we aren't going to have another CRA meeting for potentially a couple months. So we do have a city council meeting next week, and I can ask the city manager during his time to show you the breakdown of how we're planning to fund the downtown renovation. The bid is not expected to come to the city council until June.
yeah. I figured that, and I figured we had a good budget amount. I'm sure Kevin and his team put together something good, but I just, without seeing the full, how are we funding the whole thing? I don't know if we desperately need to spend the $2.6 million from the CRA, or if it can be $1 million and there's other, better funding sources.
Mr. Davis?
On that project, on the other side of it, I don't remember when we come up with the $5.2 million budget on that. I gotta think that's probably not sufficient. If it was halfway accurate at all, and it's been done any amount of time back, it's not gonna be accurate. Right now in the construction industry, and Keith is seeing this too, you can see 6 to 10% increases per month on, I mean, I just
Lumber,
had
concrete,
the
steel.
trestles just doubled from about $6,000 to $12,000 for a simple tract house. That project, that number, if it was reasonably accurate at some point in the past, is gonna quickly be eclipsed and be meaningless.
And especially if hundreds of millions, if not billions and trillions flow out of the federal government, then
That's right.
all that labor force goes to big
That's
ticket
right.
projects and.
That's right. The more trillions they spend, the more diluted it becomes, and that $5 million is a meaningless piece of money.
Does anyone know how much phase 1 was? Just ballpark? top of their head. For some reason, I thought it was 4.5, which is why 5.2 made sense to me. It's a little bit smaller of a thing, but, you know, accelerated 3 years.
But that's several years ago.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, I hope we do it better than we did phase one, because my guess is we've got way too much sand under phase one. It is horrible. It is. Yeah. I mean, you'd think you're driving on a road up north. It's so bad.
I can't address your comment on fund balance. I am tracking that on a monthly basis now, myself and Ms. Colazzo and the deputy city manager and the city manager meet every month to review that. And I can give you fund balance to the day anytime that you like it for any fund. Because I feel the same as you. I didn't like not knowing.
Yeah.
Or not seeing, so.
We're having to flip through 2 books to
So-
see the same thing.
Yeah, so we take the end-of-year fund balance from our financial statements, then add in revenues, subtract out expenses through whatever date, and there's your fund balance to date. And so we do review that every month.
Perfect.
So when is the deadline when this action has to be taken?
Well, it's going to be going to the city council in June for the bid, but typically we want to have the funding allocated before we put the bid out. The bid's going to be going out this month.
I don't know if there's an exact, like, deadline, drop dead date. You know, we're just trying to be in compliance with, you know, now that the financial statements are out, we do have the carryover fund balance. We know that figure now, so we do need to make a decision on what to do with that.
Mr. Mazares?
Well, and I think Mr. Cooper's right. I don't think there's a drop dead deadline on the action you're looking at tonight. But if this board wants to change the project that was previously approved, specifically related to phase 2 of the downtown revitalization project, and take these funds and reallocate it to some other project, then that's something that the city's going to need to know fairly quickly. And because that project, as Veronica pointed out, is moving through the procurement side, and that's something that needs on. So if there's a desire of this agency to change course on the participation in that project, that's something that needs to be decided fairly quickly.
Well, I think the frustration I'm certainly hearing expressed is that we're taking most of our eggs in our basket and dedicating it to this one project, which is a big, significant project, and not thinking about other issues that may be coming up that may be just as valuable to the generation of business in the downtown area is what I think we're struggling with.
I think the project itself, I believe, is open enough where you could amend it to take in other related projects. I mean, the downtown revitalization that's pretty broad. So my personal recommendation would be that we approve this budget amendment, and then as the statute states, you can amend at a later date if you have the need to do so. Either amend the project or create an additional project and, you know, transfer the money into that.
Okay.
Ultimately, it's about spending the money, the taxpayers' money that comes in during that year specifically for the CRA, instead of keeping it in the bank, so to speak.
I understand.
So, I tend to agree with that, but so we can approve this. They go out for the bid process. All of a sudden, it comes in way more expensive, or whatever happens. This board can then adjust that project, theoretically probably downward, and then at that point in time, you can legally do a reallocation of funds back out of that to some other place.
If you had another approved place to do that, yes, sir, you
Right,
could do
assuming
that.
we crossed all the Ts and dotted all the Is.
But then remember, you have $283,000 sitting in contingency, building money, land money that's not yet spent during this fiscal year. So, as I say, you're going to have $500,000 or $600,000 probably remaining in CRA funds at the end of this year that we'll have to do the same thing. So, if we want to identify another project going forward, probably now would be the time to start planning for that, so the project is there and available to transfer the money at the end of this year into.
And we do have our CRA master plan, so we have projects that we could go ahead and move forward if the board wanted. And there is, within the plan, an item for us to acquire property, and we have a policy in order to acquire property. So if the board wants us to move in that direction, I'm sure we can do that in the level of detail that will make Mr. Cooper comfortable.
Well, I think we would certainly like to see a list of potential things and then prioritize what we feel like is the most important, but have a list that kind of like, here are things that we could move on.
We can, as staff, we can get together and try to see what we can do to prioritize and things that could be a shorter time frame than others, and we could have some good discussions at the next meeting.
All right. Any other discussion?
Just one,
Yes.
you talked about internet coming back and trying to get us focused, and try to find out projects and things like that. I think I agree with Mr. Trace. I think we all need to figure out what we want and what we want to do with that money. And, when a property does come up for sale, staff should know exactly what our thought is. And do we want to go after that property? Do we want to acquire that, or do we not want to acquire it? Or do we want to use the money to help the person who's buying the property? So,
Or parking.
or parking. We could state parking right now, and at least, some funding can go into that to help probably the lot behind the hotel and across the street. And
Ms. Forbes?
I was going to elaborate a little bit further on what Deputy City Manager Miller mentioned. Our CRA master plan does make reference to us doing acquisition on specific corridors in order as part of the redevelopment, so that as properties came up, we could say this is already part of what our plan allows us to do, and we simply need to establish a project that goes with it. And then the other thing in reference to the strategy document, that will be a little bit more streamlined, also attaching a tiered financing component to it. It will basically allocate the amount of funding that we expect to get over the course of years, and then be able to say, based on the projects that you've referenced in your master plan, how long will it take you to get to that point? So that is what we as staff are attempting to bring forth to you.
excellent.
Mr. Davis?
Have we ever, or can you look at some kind of
Need to
allocation?
speak to your mic, so.
Have we ever, or can we look at some kind of allocation of CRA money based on the whole CRA, not just the downtown area? I don't know if we do it by acreage or square footage of buildings or something, but somebody had mentioned that previously. We've pretty much done everything for downtown, and it's now got some nice momentum, and it seems to be moving ahead. But to the detriment, or at least ignoring the rest of the CRA areas, the 192 corridors and the other areas, are we able to look at some kind of refinement on the budgets and allocate it by CRA district?
That's an internet
Ms.
question.
Forbes?
So, yes, that's the short version. We can absolutely look at that. So initially, I'll say that we were primarily focusing on downtown because downtown is the core of your city. So you want to start from within and grow. But as we move forward, we have definitely heard that multiple times from the CRA board that they would like us to look at the CRA in its entirety, and that is our intention. There is a line item, I think, in the budget that even mentions the gateway signage, that we've been kind of moving that over and over from budget year to budget year, and that's your entryway. That's in your entry points of getting into the CRAs.
But the problem with that would be that entryway is...
Speak into your mic.
That is hopscotching down the road faster than you could move the gateway. It would be, the location of it would be obsolete before it got done being built, the way the boundaries are expanding.
Well, remember, your gateway does not necessarily have to be at the beginning points. It just needs to be an identifier of when you are within the vicinity of a community. But, that project in specific, as we get closer to it, we can then decide where are the best locations of, where they are to be held. But another example would be, I believe it was Board Member Matheny who brought up the special event grant that the board approved at the last meeting, and opening that up not just for downtown but for the CRA as a whole, and we have done that. So we have as staff heard your concerns about including all of the CRA, and that is our intention as we move forward and establish projects.
Yeah.
And also, if I can also point out, we did complete some projects like the streetscaping on 192 towards Narcoossee. So the CRA has done some recent projects that really did help beautify the other districts.
Well, I think the completion of a master plan will certainly help us. Where we know what our priorities are, and we're not, don't feel like, we're just jumping around. I think would help. Well, we have an item before us. What is the pleasure of the board?
I'll make a motion to approve it.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion from Member Davis, a second from Member Askew. Jesse, will you please call the roll?
Vice Chair Davis,
Aye.
Member Askew,
Aye.
Member Trace,
Aye.
Member Loading,
Nay.
Chair Blackwell,
Aye. And the
passes 4-1.
motion passes 4-1. Are you ready for the next item? Monthly
Yes,
bi-monthly
sir.
financials?
We've somewhat discussed it, but yes, this should be relatively easy now.
Could you state your name and address, or your name and your position again?
Jeff Cooper, Deputy Finance Director, City of St. Cloud. So do you have the slide for this? Keep going. Yeah, there you go. So to address the bi-monthly financials, we've had revenue total of $1,118,000 that's budgeted for the year. Most of that comes from your Osceola County BOCC, your ad valorem taxes for the CRA area. And then you have general operating interest and interfund transfer on top of that. As I mentioned, you've only had $202,000 worth of expenditures through the end of February. So that leaves you with the balance as of the end of February again of $1,056,102. Your expenditures out of there are, you have one funded position for salary and benefits right now, one position being paid out of there, Ms. Forbes. And your services, most of your expenditures are for the agreement with the City of St. Cloud Police Department, $324,000 for the year for the police coverage in the CRA downtown area. As I mentioned, you have $50,000 budgeted for land purchase and $150,000 for building and $50,000 for machinery and equipment, those being the downtown wayfinding signs and the gateway signs that Ms. Ford mentioned. None of those items have been spent thus far, so there's $250,000. We have aids to private organizations, and those are the grants that we've been giving to small businesses and nonprofits. We have spent the majority of that money. There are some new grant programs, BTR grant program, and the other one, Ms. Forbes, help me out.
It is the special event grant.
Special event grants. None of those have been given out yet, but those have been approved at a previous meeting. And then, as Board Member Trace mentioned, we have $283,758 budgeted in contingency. In other words, we didn't have any other place to put it, and we had more revenue than we had planned expenditures, so that's where contingency comes from. So right now, as I mentioned, you have $1,056,102 remaining as of the end of February. So my professional estimate is at present, you're going to have around $600,000 in that range of excess CRA funding at the end of this fiscal year at the current rate of expenditures at least. Any questions on the bi-monthly financials? Yes, sir.
Mr. Davis?
I do have one. I'm a little confused on the income side. There's 0 income for the first quarter? Year to date, second quarter equals year to date, so essentially we have 0 activity, including interest income in the first quarter? Yep.
Yeah, these, I do not have
I
these.
understand the county grant coming in the second quarter, but it would seem like the interest is a
You're talking about operating interest, sir?
yes,
This line right here?
yes. So wouldn't they have the same amount every quarter? Assuming the interest rate didn't change.
Remember, well, the interest does change somewhat from quarter to quarter. The value of our investments changes quarter to quarter. And this is through February 28th, and that's not the end of the quarter. So you're 1 month short on your interest. And actually, as of February 28th, the February interest was probably not posted either because these were ran February 28th. So we probably didn't post the February interest until sometime the week after. So you're actually missing 2 months of the second quarter.
So,
second quarter's
but
interest.
you have 0 entry for first quarter.
I'm still confused.
Well, you've got second quarter here, which is year to date, so there's no, so if you just subtract those two, you have 0 in the first quarter.
Okay, I'll have to refer you to Antoinette. I did not put those together, sorry.
Okay.
We do have interest in the first quarter.
Sure, of course you
That
do.
just may be not reflected on there. They may just be reflecting the interest since the last meeting. I will be sure to get with my CRA code workers and make
Okay.
sure that is clearly stated for the next meeting.
And the interfund transfer, how was that accomplished? It doesn't appear like there's any on the first quarter of that either, so is it only on certain dates? It doesn't come in every month, every quarter, every certain period of time?
Unfortunately, I don't know the answer to that in terms of what that is, like what the interfund transfer is for, but I will tell you, a lot of interfund transfers only happen on the quarter or even on an annual basis, depending on what they are. I'll have to get back to you to tell you exactly what that interfund transfer is for. It's a transfer in from
Right.
another fund.
1/3 of it, exactly.
Not sure which one of it, so I would say that probably would happen on a quarterly basis, but I'll get back to you.
Yeah, that's fine.
Anything else, Mr. Davis?
No.
Any other questions? Mr. Lody?
I have one question, and you might not be able to answer this, but when the Makinson building was sold, that money, so I just want to know where that relates to what we were talking to before. I mean, I might be backing up here, but that money that was taken in from that sale of that building, it went into a contingency fund. But this contingency that I'm seeing here is, I know it was in last year's budget, but where did that go?
Into the 2.8 million that just got moved out for.
Well, I guess that's my point.
Right.
Yeah, that was all last year. So when we look at the budget, this is just this year's million in, how it gets spent.
Right.
So
So my thing is, so when we were talking about losing that, so we'd have lost that too? I mean, just, that was something that it was a sale from a property, so, anyway, regardless, I assume that's where it went, but I see it didn't roll over into this contingency, I guess is what I'm.
yeah, that's that 2.6 million dollar fund bonds. So
Okay, all right.
when it sold, it went back into that budget year, and then all of it carried over, like the 600,000 that Mr. Cooper was talking about. For this year, if we don't spend all those funds, we'll have about 600,000 that moves into fund balance for next year.
Oh, okay.
But it won't show in this when we have a fresh budget for next year.
Right.
But we're gonna ask for it to be down at the bottom to show us, so we can see.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Questions?
Mr. Manzares, does this need to be approved?
No, it's just an update.
Just the information, right? Thank you, Mr. Cooper.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Would any of our members like to give us an update on any items?
I don't want, I'll bring it up. We need to figure out what we really want to purchase in our CRA. A property up for sale, a house on 2 lots for $99,000. It was just one of the citizens let me know of that. I acted on it, got Veronica involved, and Antoinette I was involved with. It was right across from the fire station. I mean, it could be used for a number of different things, but I think our next meeting and then following meeting, we need to really focus on our map and figure out exactly what we want to do. And I mean, it's a pretty good opportunity to miss something like that.
And I assume it's sold,
Yeah,
the way you're talking?
yeah.
We asked them if they would wait. Yesterday, we contacted them. They hadn't accepted an offer yet. We asked if they would allow us to present it to the board tonight before they accepted an offer, but it's in an estate. And so the estate manager decided to go forward. On the first day, I guess they had 11 offers.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I mean,
And
it's a $250,000 lot probably, $200,000 lot,
Right.
but go for 100.
So I'm thinking if, once we figure out what we want, then it's possibly that the city or Antoinette or somebody reaches out to the real estate agencies or something and kind of let us know what we're feeling out here. If somebody's looking to unload a property or a business or something, then maybe we get first dibs of it or something. So that's something we still got to streamline what we want, I think, up here. So.
And we'll need clarity because we were lucky in this instance that we had a meeting scheduled for tonight, but in
Right.
most instances, we would have to schedule a meeting to ask you to approve it.
And I would like if we're gonna talk about buying property as a CRA, we need to have a strategy, and then it almost needs to not be knee-jerk. It needs to be a strategy around if something comes up for sale in these certain areas, in these certain pockets, then you have the opportunity to go for it, and then before you hit any contingency dates, it comes to us, and then it gets approved, or, you terminate the contract and move on.
Right, which is what we were hopeful on this particular lot we were going to present to you tonight was essentially a contingency offer to move forward with it and then allow you final action you to do it. And I agree with you, Mr. Trace. The one issue, though, as we talked about under the first item, we're still going to need some really good specifics as to the ultimate uses of these properties from this board. Is going to have to tell us what the use is, and it has to fit in within the redevelopment plan that's established. So we can't just acquire property because it's being sold at well below market value, and we want to turn around and maybe sell it to somebody else and gain a little bit of profit on it. We have to identify the specific use of the properties to be able to do that.
Which I think we can do.
That's a challenge. Mr. Davis?
On the property stuff, the only interest I'd have in buying property, just for my one position, is if it was for parking. The market is so hot that there's no need for the city to be competing with private industry to buy something that's just going to be renovated or whatever, another project like the Makeson building. There's a dozen buyers out there for any property. So unless it's something that we're going to use for specifically parking, I mean, there may be another use I'd consider, but not just to take it and flip it at some point wouldn't interest me at all.
And that's still focused on downtown, right? I mean, that's not even the other stretches of it and what strategies we need to have for it.
Well, right, the other ones don't need parking particular, but there may be something.
Yeah.
But I see parking quickly becoming a real problem. We've got a nice flow working downtown and it's really kind of starting to take off, but I think we could strangle that pretty quickly if people come down here, they can't find a place to park and they just leave and go somewhere else.
Right.
Yeah. At some point, I thought we were talking about repaving or paving some of the lots that we have that the city owns that are like the old building that's just a concrete slab.
So Mr. Sturgeon is working with several department directors right now to determine how we can move forward with the parking garage and also additional temporary parking. We are working on that right now, but I really don't have any information to tell you more than Mr. Sturgeon is actively working on that right now, and there's conversations. I believe he's working with our architect, we're bringing back the concept of the master plan, of a campus plan of the properties. So he is working on that right now.
Mr. Tracy, you have anything else?
I had something, but I'll let Joel finish.
Either one.
Go for it.
You have any?
Could we look at something temporarily, like a trolley? Maybe working out something with some of these, you got the Save-A-Lot, they don't use all of their parking, especially at night, or some of the other ones where there's parking available. Maybe the city could get some kind of a, I'm just gonna use the term trolley, but something where people could park and the city could shuttle them back and forth till 10 or 11 or whatever time that is at night. And at least get some temporary parking to get people downtown and not having to walk for blocks.
We've also been talking about designated Uber drop-off and pickup locations also, knowing that some of the people are coming downtown to drink, so that may help us with safety also.
But don't they just pick them up on their phone and grab them wherever they're at when you do the Uber app?
You can, yes, but we were talking about having a designated area for them.
You have anything else, Mr. Davis?
I know.
Mr. Tracy?
And I'm fine with us having meetings more frequent if we want to have workshops. I know Intranet's got a lot on our plate now, but like once we start formulating some of this, if we want to have workshops, we want to talk about it more instead of just every quarter or whenever we meet, then that's perfectly fine with me. We're here every week, and then this is the exciting part of us being able to like actually put some of the strategy towards it. So I'm sure you guys will be more than happy to come up.
You have anything else, Dave?
No, that's it. Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Lodi?
Yeah, I'll make a comment. You know, when it comes to land purchases or building purchases, you know, Mr. Davis, you know, says, well, you know, we shouldn't get involved in that. But, okay, so we don't get involved in it, but the city itself should be more on some of these properties down here. What about this property that just sold? They decided to build a tin shed and just store junk in it on a corner lot in our downtown. I mean, who wants that?
Where's that?
Well, the lot that they just brought up. Sure. You know, and where otherwise it could have been retail, it could have been a bike shop or retail, you know, and maybe, and I don't think we can steer, Mr. Manzares could straighten me out over here, but I don't think we can steer someone into what they have to have in a building. But like the Makinson building, we said, hey, you know, we really want to have a restaurant. You know, we looked at people that were willing to put an establishment in there that we thought and felt that going forward it would benefit our downtown. And I think that's the only thing when I look at CRA and in land purchases or building purchases, that's the way I look at it. Just the possibility that you do have a little bit of leeway there, possibly steering the future owner of that property in the right direction and not something we don't want. And that's the thing that makes that lot over there was so cheap. I know exactly what lot you're talking about because I called up and inquired about it also. And, you know, they built a tin shed on that. Poof. I don't think that's going to look very good in their downtown.
Yeah, and that was also a residential and a commercial lot.
Yeah.
So, sorry.
That's it.
I believe Ms. Antoinette was also asking if she could speak to
Antoinette?
that.
I'm sorry, one small comment. I just wanted to say, when we talk about the redevelopment of properties, there's nothing that says that we couldn't come in after the fact, even if we didn't in fact purchase it, and negotiate with the property owner to do some sort of public-private partnership to create something that's conducive to what the city would need, you know, some sort of mixed-use development. We can come in after the fact and do that.
It would help before the fact, wouldn't it, Mr. Lodi?
Yes, and then maybe we should find out who the new owner is there. Just contact and say, hey, what's going on?
Right, and also, you know, there's several factors. One of them would be the economics of it. It may behoove us to have the investor purchase the property up front, so they incur the upfront costs, and then we come in and then simply help for the improvements part of it. you
And
know?
I would be all for that. I don't have a problem with that at all. I'm just saying, let's dictate what's going on. Let's keep moving forward. Like Member Trey said, we've Member Davis, but we've come a long way in the last couple of years. I think I want to keep it on this roll. I'm proud of where we're headed downtown and how it's shaping up. And I'm going to say the word cleaning up. I mean, I've been here 20 years, and the most improvement I've seen is in the last 3-4 years, and it's exciting.
And it's that little bit of public investment that just drove a lot of private investment too. A lot of these empty shops have now filled up. So it's good.
Maybe. There's no way.
I know there's no way to actually.
Yeah, there's no way of knowing, because just the sheer growth of the county and the fact that we're downtown is going to drive. No matter if we'd have done nothing, it would have drove that.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I've read this before, and if I haven't read it, a couple times, I've read it a dozen times, that a lot of times when larger corporations or organizations look to invest in a community, in a town, a city, sometimes one of the first, when they start doing their first investigating where they may move or move their company or something of that sort, they look at how they take care of their historic downtown. And if we don't take care of it, then no one's going to want to move here. I mean, we can build houses all the way around St. Cloud, but we'll never ever have business to sustain all the houses we've got built all around us. So we have to attract other businesses here, and by the CRA and investing in our community like we have so far, like I say, I'm very proud of where we went, where we were, and where we're going. I'm proud of it. I just want to make sure we stay on that path and don't get sidetracked and say, okay, yeah, we did this, so we've set it off enough. Now we can just kind of sit back. I don't want to sit back.
Any other comment? Does anyone in the audience wish to say something?
Paula Stark, Executive Director of St. Cloud Main Street. First of all, I just wanted to let you know, Councilman Trace, your number was pretty correct. It's $4,404,187 is what we spent on New York.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so that gives you guys that baseline. Also, I just want to make the point that the home that you're talking about that sold recently, regardless of what their situation is, and there is rumor that this individual wants to put a shed on part of this property, that particular building itself is in the historic district in addition to it being in our downtown corridor. So we really need to start taking those things into consideration when we're trying to plan or approve what people are putting on these properties. So I just want to make us mindful of that, because I think sometimes we lose sight and we just go by what's on the book and not necessarily go to the next step. So if we can be mindful. But I agree with Member Loading. We do need to make sure that we're looking at some of these properties, because some of these properties can be the things that, turn the tide for some areas. And my concern is, and I know Councilman Askew is familiar with this, the house on Florida Avenue that got turned into whatever it is almost a frightening thing, and that's an example of what I wouldn't want to happen on 10th in Minnesota. So if you all would just take that into consideration. Thank you.
Any other comments? Mr. Manzarek, do you have anything for us?
No, sir.
Brings us to our next section. Our next CRA meeting is currently scheduled for Thursday, June the 3rd. With that, there are no other items, and we are adjourned. Interesting meeting.